and you're very welcome to a podcast which is all about the Irish League. My name is Peter Cinnamon, and a blowout in the BelClassico kicked off what was a riveting weekend in the Linfield Premiership. Inspired by some captivating performances from McGinn and O'Connor, the Glens gave David Healy some Derby Day blues and Warren Feeney a much needed boost in East Belfast. Lauren, they failed to capitalise on their chance to return to the summit after a frustrating day in Ballymena, while the Reds turn on the thrusters to thwart some informed Swifts. We're going to chat about that, plus the latest push for an all-Ireland league on this week's edition of Kicking Match. Another week, another podcast, another 7 days closer to the big man in a red suit delivering presents. More importantly, another couple of days where I know you, listener, have not sorted out those presents or even have an idea. I had a big conflab with the wife earlier on today, and I feel like we've got a plan, an action to get there. But I know the gift that you want is a little dose of some Irish League analysis, and I am here with my trusty elf to deliver such delights. It's great to welcome back to the podcast this week, football writer with various different papers. Hello, Stuart McKinley.
Hello, Peter. I don't think I've ever been called an elf before, so that's the first.
It played into my metaphor. You see, I'm trying to create some sort of festive feel to the podcast. I should probably get like sleigh bells and add them to the opening jingle to give it that seasonal feel. So far, the usual things that we see with this time of year, like matches being called off, hasn't happened yet. That's good. It's too early for Santa Claus to walk out with the teams. You know, that's all coming. I did see a blue and white Santa at the Newry Crusaders game, and I got to give credit to the Newry fan. He tried to get the hat on to, I think it was Ram McGivern, and he didn't play a ball with it, but I'm sure like photographers were like, please, I need a photograph with a player in a Santa's hat this early in December. But I feel like I'm giving away all the fun stuff that's coming our way. Before, though, I do get into the games and the stories and everything else in between, this has been the week where everybody's putting up their Spotify Wrapped if you are a listener to music and podcasts. And me being a creator, a podcaster, I get my own. I was able to pump out my own little stats because it was very nice. My first full year doing the podcast, first full calendar year, and it's mad to think that there's like over 100 people that this is like their most listened to podcast. There's over 500 people who like this is the top 10 podcast, all that stuff. So if you've been listening to me throughout the year, I really appreciate it. Thank you so much. It's nice to have a little collection of us all here chatting, listening. You can also do that online on social media if you haven't given me a shout, where is a good place to find out the most instant reaction to what I give to these games. And my instant reaction to the massive game between Glentoran and Linfield on Friday night was pretty much my jaw was on the floor. I would like to claim that I was one of the people that saw this coming. Unfortunately, there's no audio recording that states that fact, but this was catching the Blues completely off guard. It was the best performance of the season for Glentoran. It was the best performance of Warren Feeney's tenure. It's probably the best performance that they've had without Conor McMenamin in the side. It was immense. The Blues were not immense, it's fair to say. This night on Friday, it was all Glentoran, and they may as well be doing laps around the oval because it was just a stellar performance.
It was absolutely unbelievable, the start of the game. If you'd have said it was going to go that way in Linfield's favour, most people would have went, yeah, we would kind of expect that. I don't think anyone would have expected Glentoran to come out of the blocks that quickly and take the lead so early and then build on it immediately. It was a fantastic performance. Warren Feeney said that he knew that was going to come. He knew it was coming, and I'm not really surprised that he would say that, because there's the quality in that Glentoran team is there for all to see, and Niall McGinn is a step above the Irish League. You know, he played in Scotland for such a long time and did very well. You know, won an awful lot of caps for Northern Ireland. Was one of the kings of Leon. Um, for Niall McGinn to perform like that isn't a surprise, really, is it? And you see the outside of the foot assist and the quality for the fourth goal as well. Yeah, he's just fantastic. And I was trying to think of when have I ever seen Glentoran hammer Linfield like that. I've seen it the other way around when Glentoran have been really poor at times over the years. I've never seen Linfield crumble like that, and certainly in a Big Two game. So I wasn't surprised when sort of some of the tweets and the stats were coming out that it was, before my time watching Irish League football, that Glentoran had beaten them so soundly and so comfortably. Never, ever, ever seen Linfield fall to pieces like that, no matter how sort of mediocre maybe they've been at times. And anyone who won money on that game in a bet, well done to them. You enjoy your Christmas, because I don't know how many people would have predicted that sort of outcome.
They completely caught the Blues off guard. That early goal was key to everything. It unsettled the Blues, and from there, the tails were up. Glentoran could smell blood in the water, and led by McGinn, it was just an onslaught on the Linfield goal. McGinn was exquisite, playing passes, running at defenders. He was doing pretty much everything. This was also a brilliant game for Darragh O'Connor, who grew into the game, particularly into the second half. They were a neat little double act, and 3-0 at half time. They had won the game there and then. I know people like to say, oh, it could have been well more than four, but that really is not an understatement. The Glens could have been 6-0 up at half time. They just kept coming and coming and coming. And the Blues were just completely shell-sucked. Linfield didn't know what to do, how to handle, how to get themselves out of that hole. And I've always felt as though Glentoran are a confidence team. And when that's the way you're built, or when you have that mentality, lean into it. And getting an early goal against your rivals at home, that's totally leaning into the fast lane there. But the one side of the story is, of course, the brilliant performance from the Glens. But this complete, as you said, capitulation from Linfield took everybody off guard. There's a story in this as well, because they have looked tremendous all season, unwavering, never blinking. And to just not show up like this in one of the biggest games from your fans' point of view of the season, I imagine this stings. No matter how great it's been, this is a fly in the ointment of this season so far for Linfield.
Yeah. I remember the game at Windsor Park, a little bit earlier than this in the season last year, and Glentoran totally dominated them. And I think there was a bit of naivety maybe in some of the Linfield players then, because they maybe hadn't experienced a Big Two atmosphere too much. It's mostly the same personnel, but this is like a different Linfield team this season, and they've just been quietly going about their business, racking up points. Obviously, have dropped points against Larne in home and away, which were quite key, but just been knocking everyone else off, and we're quite comfortable, I think, in beating the Glens at Windsor. Got the job done against Cliftonville. Probably most people were expecting that to happen again, and it just wasn't the Linfield team that we've seen.
They simply couldn't adapt. They couldn't match the energy. They couldn't match the intensity. And it's easy, I imagine, to play with the wind at your back, thinking we're playing great, we've got them on the ropes. But they simply couldn't react and deal with that Glentoran side. And there's many factors here. And as I've already said, the performance from McGinn is one of them. It's one of the best performances I've seen for a player in the Irish League, probably all season. I mean, it was just fantastic. Just the poise, the vision. I mean, there's some great goals and some brilliant chances, but nothing will probably match that fourth goal. That was just nip, tuck, plenty of passes, spread out to O'Connor. To be able to see him running on the right-hand side was fantastic. And he still has a bit of work to do to slot the ball in the goal, but it just felt like a party in East Belfast. And this will be a foundation now that Warren Feeney and the men from East Belfast will want to build on, because this has been a terrible season so far for them. They've never really got going, and they've had some really poor results, been on a terrible run, and now they'll hope that they can push on, get more results like this, and not let this be a one-off performance.
Probably to give Warren Feeney credit as well. He hasn't been flavour of the month with the Glentoran fans from day one.
And with Larne on the horizon, a loss here was going to make that seat of his rather toasty, and not in a good way.
Yeah, yeah, and things haven't got any better for Warren. It's got worse, if anything. The way things have been going, and those who weren't happy with his appointment were given plenty of ammunition to keep firing bullets at him. But I looked at it and thought, Lauren's done his homework here. You talked about the intensity there. If we get the intensity right, maybe we can get on top early on. And tactically, Linfield have gone the favour in three at the back. And I always think it is if you play three at the back, you're vulnerable in wide areas. You're vulnerable high in the corners because you don't have a fullback in there, and your wide centre halves don't really want to come out. And that's where McGinn and O'Connor can get a bit of joy, and that's what they did. Well, I've seen Darragh O'Connor a couple of times early in the season, and I liked him. He's obviously played over in Scotland too, so he's maybe a little bit of a notch above your average Irish League player too, not in the same class as McGinn. I wouldn't say. You know, when you've got that little bit of extra quality, when you can get players into those areas where, like say, defenders don't really want to go, you can really be on a winner, and that's how it proved for the Glens. So I would give Warren credit there for his approach and for his tactics.
You can create mismatches, can't you? Like they were able to target players with O'Connor, with McGinn, and they got so much joy. A player I also want to give a bit of shine to is Cammy Palmer. Like he has didn't start the season nailed on in the team, but he has grown his role. He's grown into that central midfield berth for the Glens, and I thought he provided a lot of energy, tenacity, and just did the simple things really well. This is a player who swapped sides this season, and it can be a bit of a busy engine room for Glentoran, and it wasn't really clear who was going to fit in there. Besides Sule, we've seen Burns, who's obviously out. We've seen McCartan floating in there. Palmer's come in and he's established himself now. And they will need players like that to continue on producing if this is going to turn their season around. And Warren Feeney's going to get a tune out of this team consistently. The worrying thing if you're a Blues fan is you expect a result like this against your rivals. You know, sometimes the emotion, the occasion, you can have a freak result like this, but this comes off now losing to Larne. You skip out in that game against a Crusaders side who have proven are on a torrid run and do not have their starting 11 fully fit and up to the standard they usually are. So they miss the opportunity to go there. They then have a game against Newry, just blow them up, against Ballymena, just blow them away, and they just didn't come into this game ready. And people always talk about the idea of the next game, it gives you a chance, you want it to come quickly and it gives you a chance to show what you're all about, and they have that. And when people are listening to this, the game might be over, might become quite close to it, but they've got Larne, their bogey team, the team that just has them wrapped round their finger in cup and in league and everything else. And it gives them a great chance to just bounce back, but it also creates a chance where if Larne can do them again, even though it's in the cup, we see this completely unflappable team start to creak. And that's when Linfield will have to prove that they can take the wobble and keep on the track.
What we've got to remember though, within this Linfield crisis, because it only takes, like as players have said, and David Jeffrey used to say, it only takes a bad half, not just a bad game. So there'll be a crisis at Linfield. They're a point clear at the top of the league with a game in hand. It's not all maybe as black as it's painted. They do need a reaction, and that's the one thing that David will be adamant about. Go to Larne in the cup, and then they've got Dungannon in the league on Saturday, and Dungannon are no pushovers, and they'll go to Windsor Park with a lot of freedom, and Rodley will have them well up for it. Now, but like I say, they're still top of the league. There's half a season to go. So much more football to be played, and Linfield have been slow burner, gradually chipping off wins all season. And it wouldn't surprise me if they just go back into that mode come Saturday against Dungannon and start knocking up a load of wins together again and end up stretching that lead.
I will give you that, but in this league, and particularly when it comes to this title chase, it is all about fine margins. And we talked a couple of weeks ago where if Linfield had beaten Larne, they would have had a 13-point gap. That then gets close to the point, despite the game in hand, where Larne had the chance to overtake Linfield. And they blow it. They blow it away against arguably the poor side in the league. And it's a huge result for Ballymena at home in the Slemish skirmish. You talk about people feeling as though who on earth predicted Glentoran thumping Linfield? Who predicted Larne going away to this downtrodden Ballymena side and doing anything bar perhaps thumping them themselves. This was a rough and tumble defensive performance from Ballymena. They just let the clock tick away, frustrate Larne, deal with the moments of pressure. This was not a classic, but Larne missed their chance to go top, and Ballymena got what could be a huge point for them. Probably their best performance under Jim Irvin so far. Similar to Glentoran, this felt like not snatch and grab. They stood up, they were able to take on the pressure, and they rightfully take a point.
I think the similarities between the big two game and the Lauren Ballymena game are quite there for all to see. In that if you're not quite on it on any given game day, you will not get the points, and you could, if you're up against a good team, you could get turned over, which is what happened obviously at the Oval. Going back to that game, I think what's happened now is that Glentoran have set a bar where not only will the manager not accept an inferior performance to that, but the fans won't. So the players will be, made a bit of a rod for their own back. Potentially is what Ballymena have done as well. They've gone, and the manager can now rightly say, well, we can frustrate the champions and take a point off a team that was on a really good winning run before that. I won't accept us falling down and rolling over against teams that are in the bottom half of the table. Because Jim has said after a few games recently that there was performances that weren't acceptable, defensive performances that were quite poor, and as a defender himself, he'll set high standards that way. But Jim's still bedding things in. He's 19 games into his managerial career, league wise anyway, and still developing and probably still trying to work out what his best team is, and maybe he's waiting for January to maybe get a few reinforcements in. And the gap at the bottom isn't that big. I think Carrick have started to got a few points on the board over these last 5 or 6 games. They've edged them a little bit away from the bottom, while the others have been dropping points. Ballymena are certainly well capable of putting away from the bottom and getting even out of the playoff position, because Dungannon aren't hugely above them points wise. So yeah, that could be the catalyst for them.
It was the first game for me where I could see a real markup improvement from Ballymena. I thought they didn't look naive, which they had before. I think they went out there with a game plan, and broadly they stuck to it and made it work. Larne are not completely blameless in this scenario. Yes, they came up against a well-organised and determined Ballymena side, but they just simply weren't able to break them down. They were missing Levi Ives, and I think him not being there was a huge factor here. To a certain extent, this run has been based on some really great moments that they've got themselves out of jail, be it Joe Thompson or others. And on this occasion, it just felt as though their luck ran out and they just simply couldn't produce it. They couldn't create the chances. They weren't able to force any space for their attackers to get in, and it felt as though they crossed the halfway line and there was just this sky blue wall in front of them that they just simply couldn't penetrate, and they just couldn't make it work from set pieces. So Ballymena frustrate Larne, and Larne are susceptible to just not being able to break these teams at the bottom of the league. The likes of Ballymena and Newry and others, they just know they're there to defend, they're to frustrate Larne, and we've seen it has worked and it can work. And Ballymena must have felt at the end of that game, a point against a top 6 side, amazing, this is going to be great for us. And then they look at their phones or they hear in the radio, and there's Newry City also getting a point away from home at the Cruise. Last week we talked about how this Crusaders season is veering off course. It's completely off piece right now, and a result like this will not help them at all. They really should have made their chances earlier on in the game count. They should have made the lead much larger than it was, and then they left the door open for Newry to capitalise, get a late goal thanks to a bit of foresight, a bit of energy from John McGovern to score 1 minute from time, and Newry are riding back home with a huge point for them. It's another tale of two teams here, but let's start with Newry. They've been struggling for goals, they've been struggling for any kind of point, and getting 1 away in North Belfast is going to be massive for them going into this congested fixtures here in the festive season.
I think any manager whose team is struggling a little bit is always looking for just something to spark, a recovery and maybe spark a bit of a run. And there's no doubt that that result getting a point down at Seaview could be that for Newry. Seaview, to trot out an old cliche, is not an easy place to go and pick up points, and they don't lose many games there. So for a team like Newry to go down there and get a point is a great result. Albeit luck all went and got a result there earlier on the season. So maybe is there something about the cruise against these so-called weaker teams or teams in the bottom six at home? That would maybe lead you to think there might be a bit of complacency, but I wouldn't think that Stephen Baxter would tolerate anything like that. Yuri, for me, actually, it's a bit of a surprise that they are where they are because I thought, albeit there's a new manager come on board, an inexperienced manager who hasn't been a number one before, I actually thought their squad this season was stronger than it was last season. And so for them to be in the position they are isn't what I would have expected. Maybe it's just going to take a little bit of time, and maybe now, sort of at the halfway point of the season, getting that result can be a trigger. So that's obviously going to remain to be seen. But Friday night's a big one when they host Ballymena. That's a huge game. You can't downplay that one at all. That is a huge game in terms of what could happen at the bottom of the table going forward. Whoever comes out on top of that will have a little bit of an advantage and cushion. And if someone wins it, they've come off the back of a very, very creditable draw last weekend. If they can go and win the game on Friday night, then yes, they're on a bit of a roll. Like I say, that could be the spark for whoever manages to come out on top of that.
It's mammoth, and it's two teams going into it. Before this weekend, it was on a whole lot of losses, and it's two teams trying to get a bit of belief, get a bit of confidence, but they're kind of going into this feeling themselves a wee bit more. And some people would probably say perhaps it's being down at Newry Showgrounds that'll help them, but Newry have had an awful run when it comes to home fixtures. The last time they won a game at home in the league, looking through it, and I'm sorry if I've missed something obvious here, but what I can read, what goes all the way back to the 12th of November last year when they won 4-1 against Carrick. So they usually are better away from home, but they can't be giving away results against Ballymena. If they are to leave Ballymena in their dust this season and even scoot their way beyond 11th, which they did do last season, turning around their home form will be key. Scoring goals will be massive. And I talked last week about how I think John McGovern is going to give them a new lease of life going forward, give them a new outlet. And his energy up top was key, really, to latch onto that ball, to capitalise on the parry from Tuffy. And it's a mistake ultimately at the back from Crusaders who let Newry in, but they kept pushing, kept going for it, and despite not having the quality, they kept working. And for the Crews, it's another poor result. They go from getting whipped by their rivals in Cliftonville last week. They lose to Portadown in the Cup. This is a really bad run. And I know they're injured in some key positions and they haven't got their best players on the pitch. But they still should have the squad depth. They still should have that killer instinct to put this game away. There were some huge chances and Newry rode their luck. But unless you're ruthless in this league, you're going to miss out. This is the difference between the three teams that look to be creating a huge gap between teams like Crusaders and the likes of Cliftonville, who are sitting pretty and making themselves feel pretty comfortable when it comes to European spots, even this early in the season.
Yeah, what you're saying there about Newry, I actually saw somebody with a tweet earlier on saying that Newry haven't won a home game since they beat Portadown this time last year. I didn't want to be the pedant who was going to say, well, they didn't actually win that game as such. But yeah, you've got to win your home games. You've got to pick up points on your own patch if you're going to do anything. And if you're not winning home games, there's only one place you're going to be, and that's down at the foot of the table, struggling. I do think this game on Friday night is then crucial for Newry to be able to push on. Crusaders, I'm just looking back there, and they had a really, really brilliant run through October. Um, but November and obviously right in the start of December has been pretty poor for them. They did get a win at Lockall. They needed a goal well in the injury time that day, and they could have actually lost that game as Lockall had a couple of really good chances when it was level. So you just wonder what has happened at Crusaders. Is it just a case of injuries and not being able to get a settled side? Because everyone needs that no matter what level of the game you're at, and that's how the top teams do well when they have a settled side. Um, so maybe if Stephen Baxter can get that again, get that consistency in selection, maybe consistency in results. Because I look at it and I think table wise, they are a bit behind, but it's 11 points off the lead, which at this stage of the season, with a game in hand, isn't insurmountable. You would think that they could still push themselves into a title race, but they need to start putting results together.
It's the numbers do not lie. Since that defeat of Dungannon 4-1 in late October, they've went on and scored 5 goals in 6 games. It says it all. They do get a victory against Lockall, but they need to start turning things around there. And I know they came into this season a wee bit light on it, with it pretty much being up to Lecky or Jordan Owens to be the man leading the line to score the goals. Hately, another season where you're relying on him. And he has delivered consistently, there's no doubt. And they've brought in extra youthful players in Thielen and Lloyd Anderson. But it's just not coming their way. And the Laurie goals have dried up this season, and Ben Kennedy's been out. And look, it was a beautiful strike, I thought, from Forsyth. I just love to see the travel of the ball go straight into the back of the net, but it's the lack of goals which sees them slip up here. And for them, they'll be looking around them, and what they'll see is, again, their rivals in North Belfast win another game and make this feel even further away. And Cliftonville, didn't make it easy for themselves. They didn't have a great performance. That first half was not a prime example of how great they can be, but they put in a brilliant second half performance where, once again, Ben Wilson, who comes off the bench for the second weekend in a row, and this time he grabs 2 goals and helps Cliftonville get to a 4-1 victory over an informed Dungannon Swifts away at Stangmore Park. It wasn't pretty for a long time of this game, but it looks on paper like another great win for the Reds, as they don't miss the chance in the same way that Lauren did to try and close that gap this weekend between them and the leaders, Linfield.
I was actually sitting in the press box at Mornview on Saturday, and it got to half time, and there was hardly any goals scored across the 5 games that we're on, and we're wondering what way are these games going to go. And then Dungannon score, and I was thinking, this is an unusual weekend given what happened on Friday night. Dungannon have just gone 1-0 up against Cliftonville, as good teams do, and as good goal scorers. Joe Gormley steps up with the equaliser, and then Wilson gets 2. These guys are just class acts. Jim Magilton is very, very fortunate to have that type of firepower in his squad. They've conceded 10 goals in 19 games, which is only conceding once sort of every other game on average. Only Linfield have scored more goals. They're scoring a lot more than they concede, and that's a really good recipe.
They've been brilliant at the back when it comes to stats, and they've been looking good, and they do go a goal behind, and then they just turn it around in the second half. And I tweeted out myself, Niffle obviously pumped out the video, but you've just got to see that goal where it's 25 passes for the Ben Wilson goal, and it's Cliftonville all over. It's pass, move, and it's late in the game, and it just shows you the mentality that they have. And I stopped myself putting this little caveat to it, where I just looked at it and thinking, this is not something you would have seen in the Irish League 5, 10, 7 years ago. This is ideas in football being put into action here in the Irish League, that we're not just this league that's one way of playing, and it's all the best players going forward. It's always exciting when you see Cliftonville. It's always entertaining when you're a neutral, and right now they have a style of play, and it's working, and it's easy on the eye. The results are coming. It just must feel great to be a Reds fan this season.
It's that ability to stay in games and stick at it and keep doing what you're good at, keep doing what you know will conjure up a chance. Yes, there's been times when they haven't got the result, particularly in a couple of games against Linfield. But more often than not, they keep doing what they're doing. They will chalk off wins.
Well, you talk about goals. A fixture that's delivering them in spades this season is Carrick against Loughgall, following up their 4-3 at Lakeview earlier on in the season. Carrick and Loughgall share the spoils, two each. A really entertaining game between these two sides who just love to attack, love to run forward, and in the end, it's probably a fair result, but some great goals in here. My pick of the bunch is Benji McGee. I'm always raving about him on this podcast, but he takes the ball into the box, able to push off a defender, get into the 6 yard, and then just slide in the ball past the keeper. But Danny Perkins was not to be denied. He gets his team back into it. 2-2 is the result. Probably is a good point for both teams. It will also feel like 2 points dropped for both of them. And you talk about Cruz looking for a striker. Well, I think they have one. His name's Jay Boyd, but he's playing for Loughgall. He's the guy that made it honours even on 49 minutes. But yeah, I think both these teams have been exciting to watch. It's been at the back where they've slipped up at times, and on this occasion, that's exactly how it played out.
Yeah, I've seen for a bit of Loughgall this season, and surprising me now that they're maybe making a few goals because they have been fairly solid at the back on most occasions, even against the better sides. But up front, I think they've got two guys up there are enjoying playing football and enjoying the chances that are getting made for them. McGee's obviously catching the eye because he's scoring goals, as is Jay Boyd. Yeah, McGee just seems to be having fun and enjoying himself playing in the Premiership, and then he's got those guys around him in Ferris and Boyd who will put a massive shift in.
And last but not least, a game that had so much stuff going on. A big red card, which I did not think was a red card at all. It ends 1-1. Let's talk about the decision first. Danny Wallace, another red card for him for what you can only assume was for a big high boot coming in with a tackle with Jarvis of Coleraine. I've already said I don't think it's a red card. I don't even think he perhaps made contact with the Coleraine player. You were there. What do you think?
My initial reaction at the time was that it wasn't a particularly bad challenge. I also initially thought that the referee's going to deem that as a studs up, and I thought he's going red here. But I do think Danny was hard done by because it's not just that he got the ball, because getting the ball isn't the defence in football anymore. All of the ball and any contact there was with Aaron Jarvis, the fact that it was studs up was just consequential. If he makes that challenge any other way, Danny Wallace, and he makes contact with the player, I don't really think there's going to be much come out of it. He goes for the ball with his studs up because that's the only way he's really going to go and win the ball, and he did. He won the ball. It was possibly because of the nature of how he made contact, possibly a yellow card. I thought red was harsh. And when you see the replay, if there was contact, if there was 100% or not, it was around the foot ankle area. It's a contact sport. And even when I play at a very, very low level in the five-a-sides and things that I play, I'm expecting there to be contact around my feet and ankles because that's the nature of the game. Unless the referees just decided that, yeah, the letter of the law said studs up, you're gone, it's red. That's the only reason I can think that he's given that as a red card.
I don't feel as though the referee, from his position, there's a chance, I don't want to say outright, but I felt as though perhaps that was a difficult call for him to make because Jarvis is likely obstructing his view of where the point of contact was. I messaged people who were in the ground that day and they were surprised. I thought it wasn't a red card. They'd be from a similar point of view from the Glenavon stand. They thought they heard contact, which I can always play into it as well. It was quite early on. Glenavon had to play a long time. They were on an exit run up into this game. A long time with only 10 men. I thought they stood tall. They were really resilient. They did eventually let up and Coleraine got the goal, but they kept coming at them, and it was Callum Burney, the man who got the goal back to steal a point back for the Lurgan Blues to keep their undefeated run going into 6 games. The defender turned deft attacker. I haven't seen too much stuff out there, but another point of contention for a lot of Gladden fans was that Jimmy Glacken was quite high on Jack Malone on the other side of the pitch in the second half with his boot, and could have easily been a red card if you viewed it that way. And just Glenavon will feel like they were on a great run, and perhaps if things had gone their way from a decisions point of view, they could be sitting here on 6 wins in a row.
Couple of things that within that. The sending off happened 2 minutes before half time, so I kind of anticipated that Glenavon would make a change at the break and bring someone else on to show them up at the back to step into Danny's place. They brought on Sean Ward, possibly not a better player in the league you could bring on in that situation. Sean Ward just steadied everything, controlled everything, made sure that they kept the shape at the back, made sure there was players covering in front of them in midfield, and that's how they frustrated Coleraine, who didn't put enough on Rory Brown for me, and it didn't show enough urgency against 10 men to go and break them down any earlier. The Jamie Glacken incident with Jack Malone to me was straight yellow card. No problem with that. As far as I'm aware, it's a high boot, considered dangerous play rather than any sort of serious foul play. His boot comes up as Jack Malone's head comes down. We've seen it so many times in the game. I don't think it was anything other than a yellow card game because there's zero intent there other than put his foot up to try to win the ball. David McDonald's frustration was that on more than one occasion, Jamie was going to ground looking for free kicks and thinking that there really wasn't the contact there to be putting them down. To be told by fourth official that not every time someone dives is worthy of a yellow card. That was Stephen's quotes to me at the end of the game. So that was his frustration that Jamie's already on a yellow card. He's walking a tightrope and didn't do himself any favours in other periods of the game. But yeah, Coleraine, an odd performance against 10 men because they didn't show, like say, any urgency or any rush to go and get the ball in behind Glenavon and cause them problems. Tweaked things with the personnel he had on the pitch. Then he made a couple of changes. It still wasn't really working. And then an old fashioned knock from inside your own half up to the big centre forward and Andrew Mitchell, knocked down, and credit to Jamie Glacken, his finish was superb. A lovely half volley into the bottom corner to put Coleraine up. Glenavon kept going and probably showed more attacking intent after going 1-0 down. Callum Birdie going up front was a surprise, but it seemed that Stephen McDonald had thought about it before and paid off. It's one of those ones, if it pays off, he's a genius. If it doesn't, he's an idiot.
You'd probably say we could talk about this any week. It's one of those topics that come and go, but in the week that it has been, we can't go and let this podcast pass without us talking about that news broke last week that there had been a proposal from US investors to the FAI about a plan for a Premier League Ireland. The reporting was first came out through the Irish Independent, Daniel McDonnell, the journalist, and pretty much it's another pitch to try and make an All-Ireland, All-Island League. And this pitch came from investors where they were reportedly offering 90 million euros for commercial control of this new league. That was investment that they wanted to put into this to try and see if they could get this league off the ground. Clearly, they see something, they see enough potential, they would want to invest such money, such abundance of funds, and talk is that pretty much that the FAI weren't interested. There's also talk that some officials from the IFA were contacted. You know, we're not quite sure how they reacted, but it does bring this up once again. Talk of an all-island league. There's no details on how it would happen, how it would come together. I think from a fan's point of view, I don't know if there's a huge push from a majority of fans saying this is something they really want. But clearly the people that are looking at balance sheets, are having an eye in the future, are looking to try and progress football here, as well as trying to make a bit of dollar themselves, they think there's something in this idea. As a fan, what does your head tell you about this, Stuart? And perhaps as a journo, is there a certain sense where the idea of summer football and changing the league just keeps coming and coming and coming? And we know that there's some key figures within the league that really want it to happen. And I know that some fans feel this feels like some sort of inevitability. I don't think that's the case with an all island league, but talk seems to be coming round more and more.
You used the words there once again. It does seem to be every so often that this comes around, and I go back to probably 16, 17 years ago when there's a group, Platinum One, a company down based in Dublin, who were pushing this idea of an All Ireland League, and they were having meetings even with players to try and get them on board and see what they thought. And then we had maybe about 4 or 5 years ago, Kieran Lucid, Kerry businessman. He was trying to push this, and he was rebuffed very early on by the IFA. I do remember around about that time, a story broke that 10 of the 12 Premiership clubs at that time had written to the IFA to say they would like to find out more about the potential of an All Ireland League, but it obviously never got anywhere near coming off the ground. This one was quite interested in that the figures were being thrown around, and usually money talks. And if you start to offer clubs big financial incentives, you can start to win them round to get them at least to the table to talk about it. This seems to have come and gone very, very quickly. This one, if you're not going to be a club that's making that cut for an All Ireland League, you're not going to vote for it. You're not going to get a Ballymena, for example, in their current position, saying, "Yeah, an All Ireland League would be great." They're not going to be anywhere near it. I just think that clubs might be wary if they're not going to be in it. Say, I'm a little bit surprised initially, anyway, that the clubs who would more or less be guaranteed a place aren't wanting to know a little bit more about it.
While I would be able to broadly suggest, or you could just go back and find the quotes, you would say that this team supports the idea of a summer league, to go back to that. When it comes to the all island league question, there's not as clear data, there isn't clear answers from many of the clubs when it comes to management, when it comes to the board, when it comes to the chiefs in there. I still have that little document that came about from that proposal a number of years ago. It was a really interesting document where it went into how the island of Ireland has a bigger population than Scotland, and compared to some of the teams that are earning big money from the size of the Scottish League, you compare to some of those areas, the likes of St Johnstone is from Perth, and that's a population of 47,000. You have Motherwell, that's 32,000 when it comes to the area of that town. You compare that to some areas and towns within the island of Ireland, and you're thinking they're far bigger, or of similar size to a Motherwell or St Johnstone. And who would want this? I know what you mean. If you are a team at the bottom of the top flight, you're thinking, well, to be honest, I'm not really getting much headway against the top teams in our division. I don't know if I really want to try or really find out how it goes when I'm going against St. Pat's and Shelburne and Shamrock Rovers. However, let's talk about the elephant in the room. We have some full-time teams in this league. We all know who they are. And they clearly would rather be playing against a team who's bringing 1,000 fans to their stadium every time, compared to some teams in this league who might not even bring 50. And with that, they obviously want more revenue so they can grow their team, so they can pay for these full-time players, maybe even attract better players because they're in a higher profile league. Where's his money going to come from? Well, I guess the idea is it's going to come from broadcasting, it's going to come from sponsors. And the question will be, is when there's talk of trying to get involved, the FAI, IFA, NIFL, we see tonight of that we're recording this podcast that we've seen the 4 big Belfast teams announce that they're doing a elite youth league, and they're creating this whole new invitational network, and they're going to invite these other academies, and look, that's all networking things, and they can do what they want there. That's youth football and trying to progress the youth sides and help themselves and get better talent and stuff like that. But to say it out loud, yes, they are obliged to stick around. But what if Linfield, Larne, Cliftonville, Crews, Glentoran, even adding Coleraine, if they want to join and then they push, it's one of those things where do they want to get into that fight? Do the organizers want to do that? And if we're talking about how summer football is going to help the league by X amount get more revenue, expanding the league to beyond just Northern Ireland could make more money for these clubs. Is that not going to interest them, perhaps? If you could get as the baseline for joining an all-island league, hypothetically, was more money for finishing last in that league than it would be playing in Europe, which is always the big golden egg that people talk about. How, why would you want to leave this when you're giving up potentially $250,000 in European money? If finishing last in this all-island fantasy league is 300 grand, let's just say, and there's nothing to prove that would even come close to that, is that not going to be enticing to club owners?
I think that's exactly the key point there, is what you've hit on. Because if you put two leagues into one, you're immediately cutting down the number of European places, and rather than four from each jurisdiction going in, it's four overall. So you've got less of a chance. So if suddenly you're going, well, you don't have to qualify for Europe to get that type of money in, you're going to get that anyway. That could be the game changer. Because like I said, their money talks. If you're telling someone you can finish bottom of the league and get $250,000 rather than having to fight your way into the top four or through playoffs and things like that, it might prick a bit of interest. I think the problem is,
Plus, you have maybe 1,500, let's say, Derry City fans coming to your ground twice a year. You know, Derry brought 20,000 to Dublin for that cup final last year, and the one recently sold tens of thousands when it comes to the FAI Cup. If you're a chairman of an Irish League team, particularly one at the top end, you're looking at and you're seeing dollar signs.
I think that is the great unknown, though, is how many travelling supporters would you get going to these places? I loved the Satanta Cup in the early days. It was fantastic. And I certainly think in theory that is a big thing, to get travelling supporters. And like you say, there's a lot of games in the Irish League where there's not an awful lot in an away stand. I was actually very, very surprised by how few fans Coleraine brought to Moorview Park on Saturday. Um, we all want atmosphere. We all want games that are watched by big crowds. If you've got a full home stand and a full away stand, it creates a spectacle. And I think that then leads itself to being appealing for TV, and then you can get maybe more revenue that way. I think it is the great unknown as to how much would appeal to travelling supporters. People always say, oh, if you're going to Dundalk, you're looking at 2 days, looking at an overnight either before or after. Limerick's not exactly close either. Dublin is doable, down and up on the same day, no matter where you are. I think on the island, even if you're fully in at Derry City, I would love to see grounds full, but I'm just not sure it actually is going to happen. It's an All Ireland league.
There's one thing I can guarantee you, Stuart, that I know for sure. This is absolutely not the first, and it will not be the last time that I will discuss this topic on this podcast. And
No, like I say, it comes around about
I
every
know,
4 to 5 years. So let's set our watches for about 2027. It'll be coming
and
around
I
again.
know there's some people absolutely screaming at this podcast that all these suggestions, but I'm just here to set it out of what the topics are of either side. And at the minute, I can't even get into how would there be relegation and promotion, how many teams, how would it work, all those things. But we will address it when it comes round. So sticking a pin in it, and quickly before we actually talk about this weekend's games, you are of the Mid-Ulster persuasion. I'm sure it's been busy this season with Glenavon and Loughgall doing bits in the top flight, and then Portadown on their big new adventure trying to get out of the championship. Of course, many people may already know the results of these games by the time they're hearing this, but on Tuesday evening this week, big games for all those teams. Glenavon have got a repeat of that rather testy affair against Coleraine, except up at the Coleraine Showgrounds. And Loughgall go to Shamrock Park to play against Portadown. both these games in the quarterfinals of the League Cup. Portland actually beat Loughgall in the Mid Ulster Cup last week. So interesting couple of games, and it's set up, particularly with Linfield going against Larne in the fourth quarterfinal, the one being Dungannon against Newry, that a team non-top six, obviously Colerane's the other top six team still in there, for our team to go on a little bit of a run here.
Given that the draw for the semi-final has already been made before the quarterfinals are played, I think there's a massive incentive for any of those four teams, Portadown, Loughgall, Coleraine, Glenavon, to get to the final. Coleraine have been in the last three League Cup finals, and they're the highest placed team out of those four, so they would be naturally considered the favourites. But there's nothing to suggest that any of those other three teams can't be in a League Cup final come next February, March. Can Portadown pull off a similar feat when they were in the championship back in 2009 and go off and win the League Cup? They've done it before.
It would be some story.
Yeah, it would, but it wouldn't be a massive, massive surprise if they at least got to the final. I don't think the Mid Ulster Cup game against Loughgall last week has any bearing on this one. Loughgall made a few changes. It's a tough one to call. And if Portadown were to play like they did against Crusaders in the last round, they've got a big, big chance. The other one, you'd probably make Coleraine favourites because they're at home. But they would need to play an awful lot better than they did on Saturday. And maybe Glenavon know how to play against them and how to contain them. And if they can keep 11 players on the pitch and create a few chances, then you just never know. And they're the team that's on form. They've got momentum. Stephen McDonald's confident. The players are confident. And when you're on a winning run, winning becomes a habit. It's much easier to win games when you're winning them beforehand.
A proper Mid Ulster derby in the semi-final, particularly with them being in separate divisions, just would be a little bit tasty. But I think
yeah, bring it on. We need one of those this season.
It would be fun, wouldn't it? From I guess a neutral's point of view. I'm sure many people will be predicting a repeat final of Coleraine against Linfield, but of course we could see a repeat final of that 2009 final. We could see Newry against Portadown, run it back, whatever it is, many years later. It would be some going between two teams who have not much love for each other in recent times.
Cup football, and then as we know, anything can happen. But yeah, if you could get us some odds on the Portadown Newry final, might be worth a pound of anyone's money.
Well, if you want to get down to it, you're more than welcome to. Just don't be using my money. But we will point our attention towards this weekend's game. 6 full schedule in the top flight. 3 on Friday, 3 on Saturday. Let's go through Friday's games first, where Carrick hosting the Cruise is your stream game. And this is just Cruise. Every game now is a get-right game, try and get themselves on track, but they're going to have to tighten themselves up the back because Carrick Rangers, particularly at home, will come at them. And this would have felt only a few weeks ago as a nailed-on Crusaders win, but I definitely think, particularly being at Taylor's Avenue and the way both teams have been playing, this is more even than it has been in a long time.
For Crusaders, this may be considered possibly the worst game that they could have, given that the run that they've been on, where they can't really string a couple of wins together lately. Going down to Taylor's Avenue on a Friday night is not conducive to getting you back on track. The flip side of that could be that they are well aware of that and will step up. I look at the stats, and Carrick do have sort of the second worst defensive record in the league, which isn't going to help them get up the table. And Crusaders may be able to play on that. I think the style of both teams means that this is going to be a physical battle. It's going to be intensity from both teams. And while it may not be one for the purist, it doesn't always have to be like that to be entertaining. I think this could be a really good one for the viewers on the stream.
It's one of those ones where Crusaders would need to get going again and find themselves, and I think particularly after that Newry result, the first thing that they'll be going in to work on is finding that killer instinct. And Carrick Rangers do not have the most stout of defenses. Saying that neither do Crusaders, but I think Crusaders might just squeak this, maybe 2-1, 3-1 perhaps. And if Carrick are to have a chance of taking all three, they'll just have to tighten up at the back and perhaps outscore a limp Crusaders team. Larne against Glenavon. Larne trying to shake off that poor result against Ballymena, hosting Glenavon. We all know the run that Glenavon's on. Glenavon go into this on a short week, as some people might say, having played in the League Cup. But of course, so will Larne have. So kind of adds a bit of extra chaos to this game. How will these teams react to it? And as much as I think Glenavon have really sharpened up and are playing really well as a unit, they aren't particularly scoring a whole lot of goals going forward. And I think perhaps just that Larne firepower, which was missing in action last Saturday, will find themselves and will help score Larne to the victory. I'm going to say 2-0 to the Inver Reds.
As much as Glenavon have been on a really good run, those games have been against the bottom six, and Saturday was the first point they'd taken under Stephen McDonald against a top six team. So this is a completely different test for them. What you might get here is a real measure of the difference between, not so much the difference, sorry, between full time and part time. It's the difference between a full time team playing on a Tuesday to Friday, and a part time team playing an away game at Coleraine and an away game at Larne from Tuesday to Friday, and what impact that may have on a performance. I know from speaking to Stephen McDonald on Saturday, he won't have anything like that as an excuse. You know, he's a footballer. This should be an issue. Everyone wants to just play games rather than listen to him on a training ground. But we know that there are certain factors that can come into the things to influence a performance. And if you've got guys that are coming out of their work to dart the Coleraine to play a game on a Tuesday night, to go home, to go to bed, to get up again on Wednesday morning to go to their work, not having a great recovery, and then having to dart the Larne to play a game on a Friday night, we know that preparation isn't perfect. Whereas Larne will have their feet up, and they'll be in on Wednesday morning doing a session just to get the legs moving again, and they'll just do some light stuff before then going out again on Friday, and they'll be in a better place, and that would lead you to think that Larne would go and win this game without too much difficulty. But it will also be similar styles. You talked earlier about the Cliftonville goal and that not being something you would have seen in the league so many years ago. But Larne play football, they keep it on the ground, they move it around. And Glenavon have been starting to do that too. So it'll be interesting to see what sort of way Glenavon play when they're faced with a team that want to play football as well.
We spoke earlier, Newry hosting Ballymena. Newry having an awful record at home when it comes to securing the victory. Ballymena not having a particularly hot away form themselves. I'm going to say this outright. I think it's the key difference in these two teams. I think Newry are going to win this 3-0. And I think what I've seen recently, despite not being as proficient as they would like to be at the back, what Newry have is players who can attack and players who can cause trouble going forward. Looking forward, McGovern, Sally, and I just think on this occasion they'll be up for it and they'll get the goals. And what Ballymena lack is just a bit of killer touch up top. Even if they get the ball to progress, they just don't have the players to get forward, and I think they might get shell-shocked here. Likely to be probably just a scoreless draw or 1-1, but I just fancy this to be a bit of a coming-out game for Newry City off the back of that Crusaders game.
There's no doubt that Newry do have the attacking talent they've talked about there. You and I were at the game earlier in the season when they were at Glenavon, and it wasn't a particularly great game, but they were a very, very big threat going forward. Definitely have that talent. But when it does click, they can score goals. And like we said earlier, it's just about which of these teams wants to embrace that result that they got last Saturday and really drive on and kick on from it. Yeah, I do think that just that extra threat that Newry have and McGovern coming back into the team adds to that. I would tend to agree with you that they would be maybe be the team more likely to take this. And again, we're talking about it, Bark getting the point, coming from behind to get that against Crusaders last week as a spark, then going and winning this one, getting the home form back on track could be an even bigger spark for them. And suddenly, if they can win this, there's 3 points ahead of Ballymena at the bottom of the table, and then they can start to try and look up a bit. And Ballymena, say, defensively great against Lauren, but they've got to repeat that, and they haven't been good enough at the back. And it's not just me saying that; their own manager has said that this season that they haven't been good enough at the back. And if they're not good enough at the back, given the pace that Mary have up there and sort of the incisiveness of the like of Ford as well, yeah, they could definitely punish them.
Fun little outing there. Going to Saturday, Coleraine host Loughgall. Again, another fixture where teams will be playing in the Cup midweek. Loughgall going up the Coleraine showgrounds. I think, despite how poor Coleraine have been, I think that Coleraine have the weapons to unlock that Loughgall back line. It would be a great result if Loughgall would be able to get the goals to get a result up there. But I just think the pace and the tenacity that Coleraine do have, I think they'll get the goals to win. But it'll all depend on if Loughgall can get themselves going up top as well. And if they cannot be bewildered by the trip, it could be close. I'm going to say 2-1 here to Coleraine.
Coleraine haven't won in four in the league, and they haven't been scoring a huge amount of goals in those games. I'm just going on what I saw at the weekend, and they would need to be an awful lot better than they were against Glenavon if they're going to win this one. Yeah, they're capable of it. They've got the squad. That's never a question with this Korean team. It's just what performance you're going to get from them. And then on the other side of that one, Loughgall, who I've seen a lot of, and they've done very well. They've maybe hit the period in the season where you anticipated they would hit in and around the halfway point. Could they grind out results when the going got tough through November, December, January? And they're not doing that at the minute. And they do need to get themselves back on track. And it's one thing getting a point at Taylor's Avenue. It's another thing going up the Korean and getting a point. Form wise, it is a difficult one to call. But yeah, I suppose the fact that Korean are at home, you'd be leaning towards them. If Loughgall could go there and get a result, they're threatening Korean for their place in the top six. And that's a big incentive. I've spoken to Dean Smith after several games when they've been potentially getting into the top six or getting at least very, very close to it. So like I say, that is the incentive for them. Yeah, they just seem to hit this patch where they are starting to realise that the Premiership. Yeah, it's fun at the start. You've got all that enthusiasm, but you get 19 games into it, the halfway point. Yeah, you've got to do a little bit more. So they've got to do that now. So yeah, if you're asking me for a call, which you are, yeah, I'll go with Korean for this one as well. But a tight one, a tight one. You're going 2-1. I would say that will not be too far away from what would be the final outcome there.
It really shows how far Loughgall have come that it feels this close, that it wouldn't be a massive shock if they are to get the result up there towards the North Coast. So, yeah, it could be close. I don't know if this game will be the Angry Dog. No doubt that Linfield will be as they host Dungannon Swifts at Windsor Park. Look, Linfield just are not dropping points at Windsor Park these days. The last time they lost the game there, well, it would need to be against the colours of Larne. Dungannon go in feeling a bit good. 2 wins out of 3, despite that loss against Cliftonville. But I just don't think over 90 minutes they will have the ability to withstand what Linfield are going to throw at them. And I think I'm going to say it's maybe a 3-1. Perhaps Lusty springs an attack on again, but more than likely to be a 3-0. So Linfield here, not hard to back them in this situation, I think.
No, I can't see anything other than a Linfield win in this one. With all respect to Rodney, Macquarie, and Dungannon, Linfield are a superior side. They're at home. They don't often slip up 2 games in a row, and much as they do play Larne in the cup in between, I wouldn't have liked to have been in the Linfield change room last Friday night I know Andy Waterworth said on his commentary, he'd like to have been a fly on the wall, and he was like, well, actually, no, I wouldn't. I would agree. I would tend to agree with him. I don't think I would have been a place that would have been any fun or enjoyment at all. And I would say that the Linfield changing room before they go out on Saturday against Dungannon will be a tense place. David will be drilling in those players that you do not go out and perform like you did last Friday night at the Oval. Otherwise, you know, January's coming and I don't care who you are. You know, there's an exit door there and you could be going out it. Someone could get a harsh reaction off Linfield here, be it this week or be it in the coming weeks.
Random thing that's popped into my head. Randomly, could we see a Linfield player get sent off early and then make this a bit of an entertaining one? I know that's just a wild assumption to make, but I don't know. If we're looking for twists and tails in the season, you never know what it could be. Getting a wee bit too excited and making it harder for Linfield when they don't need to make it difficult themselves at all. Let's go to the game of the weekend. High flying Cliftonville go against a resurgent Glentoran. Will Cliftonville keep going and send Glentoran back down to earth with a bump? Or will Cliftonville be the latest team to feel the wrath of this brand new, rejuvenated Glentoran? It's two teams who like to attack. The fact that it's at Solitude definitely favours Cliftonville. I think Glentoran will need to show that they can perform beyond just that one game against the Blues. And I just think with all this attacking force, I do think this will be a return to earth for Glentoran, and I think Cliftonville will win this out 3-1.
Yeah, you're going 3-1, so you're anticipating that the Cliftonville are going to concede, which they don't do very often.
Well, the way
Um,
McGinn and O'Connor is playing, you got to give them something. But no, I know exactly what you mean. I did my team last week, and I even now I'm sitting there thinking, you know what, there probably should be more Cliftonville players along that back line. But yeah, I think they'll get the goals, and that'll be the key thing to get victory here.
we talked earlier on about the stats and Cliftonville's goals compared to the goals they concede. I think that they've got to be massive favourites for this one on their home patch. The form they're in, the goal scorers they have, and that's even without Glentoran coming off the back of a fantastic victory. Um, this is a test that I've said before many times about teams in various leagues and that. Once you get a big result, Glentoran have got to follow it up now. One thing beating Linfield 4-0, and yeah, back in the day, it might have been one of those ones where they're trotting out the DVDs of that one for someone to have as their keepsake. Um, but if that's just a one-off result, it's not going to do actually Warren Feeney any favors. And the players, they have probably set themselves a bar that people aren't going to accept them dropping off any lower. So if they don't go and follow that up, it's just a one-off result and they can't get consistency. Um, and that might be the motivation for them. But Cliftonville have been doing very well. They don't concede many and they score a lot more than they concede. I think it may have been the last time I was on with you. It was just before Glentoran had Cliftonville at the Oval earlier in the season. I think I was anticipating maybe Cliftonville going there and winning. Glens got a 1-0 that day. I do see this one being different. I just think Cliftonville are in a bit of a groove. And coming from behind last Saturday, even if it was against Dungannon, doing that at Stangmore Park is not easy. Other teams have faltered at Stangmore this season, even though Dungannon aren't doing particularly well. So to come back from 1-0 down there and win 4-1 shows a bit of character. And on their home patch, in a bit of form, with goal scorers and not conceding too many, I'm definitely going Cliftonville on this one. And then what that means for Glentoran going forward, if the big two win is just a one-off, I don't really know. That's going to be the test.
We have just earned ourselves the privilege of being on a couple of Glentoran dartboards this week. But we'll see how it goes. I'm sure Twitter is a place where you guys be able to tell us off. If there's a chance they want to go tell you that your opinion was brilliant, Stuart, or more likely tell you that they disagree with you very politely, where can they do that online, sir?
Yeah, just at Stuart D McKinley on Twitter. And if anyone wants to take my predictions seriously, I can go back to the days when we used to do them weekly in the Telegraph, and there's a particular manager back then who um he's actually back involved in the league now after being out for a while without giving away who it was. Um, and if I was speaking to him, he'd have asked me, "Are you on the predictions this week?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Put us down to get beat." He always wanted me to put his team down to get beat. Whether he was using that as an incentive in the changing room, I don't know. But then he also said to me once, "Do you do a bet on the on that? You know, if you do the predictions?" And I sort of laughed and went, "No. Have you read my predictions?" So yeah, I wouldn't be putting any great money on my predictions. But we call it as honestly and as best we can, and yeah, just think that it's a league that if you want to go into how accurate you can be, just go and look at last weekend. And like I said, if anyone made money out of bets last weekend, well done. I'd shake your hand.
That's very true. Bonkers weekend last weekend, and I'm just glad that my fantasy team somewhat survived that unlikely turn of events, unfortunately. But hey, that's all. That's how it goes. I don't think the other players were able to totally grasp what went down themselves anyway. So I didn't do too bad. But Stuart, once again, thank you so much for jumping on the pod this week. It's been an absolute pleasure. Till next time, cheerio.
Very welcome, absolute pleasure, and I look forward to chatting again as this title race starts to work its way out. Last season we had one stage 5 teams in the hunt. Might be down to 3 or 4 at the minute, but it's definitely going to be interesting as we get further and further in, and I look forward to keeping an eye on it and then chatting to you about it again.
To be honest, still haven't got a single notion on. Not that chat was going to help me decide what I was going to get, my family for Christmas or that type of stuff. But sometimes you just think, chatting through things, inspiration will come. I know if you want to give me a little gift, you can do it early. Maybe you've done it already. You can subscribe to this very podcast via Spotify or whatever your platform of choice is. You can hit a wee notification and say, hey, I want to subscribe, I want to follow. It's great. It means you get a notification to say, hey, Kicking Match is up. And especially with the past few weeks, people have needed different recording schedules, all the rest. Sometimes you're like, when on earth is he going to upload it? Hopefully I've got this to you nice and early on Tuesday evening. That's the aim, but if not, subscribing is a good way to know. Another way to know is if you follow me on Instagram, Facebook, or Twitter. It's @KickingMatch on all of them. And as I'm sure you know, that once I've got it done, once the pod is up, you can see the new graphic and I'll be posting stuff about it as well. So that's a good spot to do it there. Like I've said before, if you haven't got your Christmas tree up, well, you probably should have. Come on, timing. You've only got a few weeks to go here. You want to enjoy it for at least a few weeks rather than days. But you can take this hands-free. You can say, hey, smart speaker, please play Kicking Match, Irish League podcast. Big one, long one. Time to get out of here. Until next week, see you soon, and have a great week, my friend. Talio!